Hi, this is a demo to go over what it takes to process a form's data with PHP and send its data via email. This demo will be broken down into 4 parts. Part 1 is going to be gathering and sanitizing the data from the form. This will be important for all forms that you might craft for a website, not just ones utilizing the mail function. Part 2 will be where we validate the data gathered. Part 3 will be where we build the values for the mail function in order for the email to be sent. And Part 4 will be some enhancements that we can do with PHP specifically. So let's get started. When I type into the form right now, and I tab into the next item or I lose focus on the initial field, then you can see that it starts working on our onSubmit just like we did in class. That's going to be a problem for us when we want to validate this form later and check on the data that's being processed from this form, because it's going to force us to always fill out all the fields of this form. So the first thing I want to do is disable the JavaScript. I can either do this through the browser or more easily for right now on the page itself. While I'm here, I'm going to change my method from get to post. And down here at the bottom, I want to disable all of this JavaScript. I'm going to put a note to myself to re-enable the JavaScript after we have completed all the PHP. The next thing I'm going to do is change this file from form.html to form.php. And I'm going to put a PHP tag at the very top above the doc type. Because we are processing data, this needs to be done before a single character of HTML is rendered by the browser. Otherwise, we'd have to worry about the output buffer, and there's no need for that in this instance. I can capture and validate all of the data from my self-parsing form right here. I'm going to do what's called an include. An include, in essence, allows you to insert code from one file into another. It is another way we can go about working smarter and not harder with programming. I can type all of the parse code in here instead of including the parse, or I can just put all of the information I need into the parse PHP file that I'm going to create right now. I'm going to create a PHP tag at the top of this. By putting my parsing code in a separate page and using the include function, it's in essence putting it on the same page. But putting it in another file makes it easier and cleaner for us to refer to, much like when you have CSS and JavaScript in their own file. You'd want to point to it like you would any other file with a relative path. Our parse PHP page will need to have the PHP tag on it, but since we aren't doing anything but PHP here, we do not need to have an ending PHP tag on it like we saw with the PHP form file. The closing tag of a PHP block at the end of a file is optional, and in some cases omitting it is helpful when using an include or a require, so that unwanted white space will not occur at the end of a file. The parse PHP page will parse our data. The word parse means to analyze an object specifically. It is commonly used in computer science to refer to reading program code. But in our case, it is analyzing the data sent from our form. That is this file's job. I'm going to set the error reporting function at the top of this page. It is a built-in PHP function that allows developers to control which and how many errors will be shown in the application. For me, this will simulate my host's error reporting. I'm going to need a means in which to detect that my form has been submitted. So I'm going to go to my form PHP page, and I'm going to, at the bottom of my form, but within the form element, create a hidden field. And I'm going to call this hidden field did submit. I could use the name attribute on my submit button and detect whether or not that name value is in the post array data, but I like this method a little bit better. Technically, in the submitting data process, there's no difference at all. The server side will never know or care about how the input is being displayed or processed on the client side. At one point, this method helped combat an issue with Internet Explorer submitting a form without the submit button's data being sent. But at this point, it would be an extreme edge case. So here's my hidden field. The name is did submit and the value is 1. And this will send an additional key value pair to our super global array. I'm going to save this file and go back to my parse PHP file. So the difference between sending the data via GET and sending the data via POST is that GET sends the data to the URL window, and there is a limited number of characters that are available to us in the URL window. So by sending things via POST, we can send more data, and we can also hide the data. This is particularly important when doing login forms that may have passwords. So now I'm going to show you one of my favorite methods to see the data come across. Since POST is not visual, we need to find a way to make sure that all of the data that we are gathering is coming through in the post data array. I'm going to use a function called var dump, and I'm going to use the scalar underscore post. This is going to allow me to see all of my post data array. When I go to my locally hosted page, and we're now on form.php, we can see there's this thing up here that says array 0 and some curly braces. This is our post data array. Since we have not submitted anything to the form yet, there's nothing in this array. If I hit the send button right now, I'm going to get an array of 5 items. A name that's empty, a email that's empty, a message that's empty, subject that's empty, and did submit, which equals 1. Please note that the radio box and the checkboxes are not in this string of data. In order for those items to come across in the post data array, they need to be selected. So if I hit send now, you can see I have 7 items in my post data array. Name is still empty. I didn't put anything in. Email is still empty. Radio is the first radio button, which I had selected. And then you'll note here, check selection. It's not a string, it's an array. And this array has 2 items that would be the 2 checkboxes that I checked. Check 1 and check 2. Message is empty, I didn't fill anything out. Subject is empty, I didn't select anything. And did submit is still 1. So here I'll go ahead and select radio 2. I'll select checkbox 1 and checkbox 3. I'll put some message in here. I will select a job or select an item here and then hit send. We can see that all of our fields have pieces of data in them. So name, I'm a test order, test at example.com, radio 2, that was the radio I selected, check 1 and check 3. So see, this is an array. Check selection is an array. That's important. We'll get back to that later. There's a message. That's what I typed in. Our subject is job inquiry, and did submit is 1. var dump allows me to see that I have captured all the data I wanted from the form. It allows me to see all the keys in the data array and the values, but I need to store each of those values in their own variables in order for me to be able to manipulate them so that I can then sanitize them. If I want to get the value of an item from the superglobal array, all I have to do is call it by its key. Unlike JavaScript, where all your arrays are indexed, PHP has key value pairs. If I want to get the value of our item called didSubmit from the post data array and store it in a variable, this is how I would do that. All PHP variables start with the scalar. You can think of it like the keyword var or let in JavaScript. So here I'm creating the didSubmit variable. I'm going out to the superglobal array and grabbing it by its key. So here I can just say if didSubmit post was submitted. Now when I go back here and I refresh this page, I'll go ahead and continue the form. So now you can see post was submitted. It echoes out that piece of data. So I know that the form was submitted. Because I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of code between the start of this and the end of this curly brace, I'm going to go ahead and make a comment. And this just helps me kind of keep track of where my matching curly braces are. So the first thing I want to do is capture all of the data. Sure, I have it in this var dump, but I can't really do anything with it. Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and comment out var dump. So first I want to confirm that the post was submitted. Yes, I can see that the post was submitted. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. So when the post gets submitted, I want to capture all the data. And I'm going to do this by storing them in variables, just like I did on line 6. So in order to capture the data, I just need to grab the value by its key in the post data array. So just like I did with didSubmit, I can do the same with name. So I'll make a new variable and call it name. Scalar name equals post name. This will give me the raw dirty data. Now I want to clean it. I'm going to use a function called filterVar, and what filterVar does is clean the dirty data we give it. In the case of strings, it strips tags and removes illegal characters from the string. In the case of an email, it removes illegal characters from an email address. We can use filterVar to validate too. We'll be doing that on our email later. URLs can also be sanitized and validated as well. But in the case of name, I just want to sanitize the string. FilterVar takes up to 3 arguments. First is the variable with the raw data. Next is the filter that we want to apply to that data. And the last optional argument is any sort of flags or special options that we need to apply. We don't need that, so we won't be using it. Here's name and filter sanitize string. I'm going to add trim to the process because it's a good idea to cut off any spaces at the start or the end because users sometimes do those things. So this is going to be email. But because email has special characters, I'm not going to use filter sanitize string. I'm going to use filter sanitize email. Like name and email, radio selection is only going to carry one value, so I don't have to treat it specially. Additionally, radio selection isn't going to have any spaces before or afterward unless somebody is doing something funky with our HTML, or we accidentally left a space in our value attribute. But that's something that we can control and fix. So I'm not going to worry about putting trim on this, but I'm still going to make sure that my data is properly sanitized. The checkboxes are a special case since we can have more than one checkbox checked. And the way that they were set up is an array inside of an array, if you recall. In fact, I can just go back to the page and remind you. So our superglobal array is an array. As you can see, it has the square bracket notation on it. That is our key, and this is our value. So here we have check selection. This is the name of our array, and we can see it has two values in it, check 1 and check 3. So I'm going to grab our checkbox array. I'm going to store it in a variable called check selection. I'm going to go and get it by its key. And just kind of as a quick reminder, all items in the form need to have a name, and that name attribute is how the post data or the get data array, the superglobal array, understands what the key is for the value being passed. So if we look at our HTML on Form PHP and we look at the checkboxes, you can see that the name of the checkboxes are check selection with the square brackets. This tells PHP to make each value that's been selected an item in an array called check selection. So as you see here, our array is check selection. It's an array. It has two items in it. So you can see with our HTML here, right? Check selection, put it into an array. Put this item into an array called check selection. So here we are with check selection. If I were to echo this item out, it would just say array. So I need to have access to that item in the array, and I also want to clean it. So the first thing I want to do really is I want to check that check selection is an array in the first place. If one item has been selected, then it will be an array. I can do that with a function called isArray. This will tell me if that item is an array. If it is, then I can go inside the array with the filter var array function. That's my first argument. And then the second one is filter sanitize string, because each item in the array is going to be a string. So it goes through each item and cleans it, then reassigns the entire array back to check selection. I'm not going to trim anything here for the same reason I didn't trim anything in the radio selection. As long as my values don't have any spaces in them on either end, I shouldn't have to worry about trim. Next, I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it check selection message. And I'm going to use the join function. And the join function, just like in JavaScript, allows me to take an array and join those items together with a specific character. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and put a comma and a space. But now the second argument is the array that I want to get that value from. Now that I've done that, I want to do the same thing that I've done for name and email with message and subject. Because our message text area interacts with a human being, they can accidentally put spaces at the start and the end of their message. So we will want to use trim on this as well. Inside of trim, I'm going to use my filter var. Inside of that, I'm going to grab my post message. Inside, and then the second argument is filter sanitize string. So now we're going to do the same thing with our subject, filter var, post, subject, and the second argument, filter sanitize string. Now that I have all of my data cleaned, I can go ahead and type the word echo so that when I submit the form, I can still see all the cleaned variable data on the page. And so you can see I still have I'm a test order, test at example.com, radio 2, check 1, check 3, my gobbledygook message, and the item that I selected. So this ends part 1. We've captured and cleaned the data. Next, in part 2, we'll validate the data. So thanks for watching and happy coding!